Hello, Packers fans, wherever you may be. It's time for another edition of the Pack Attack Cast for September 29th, 2025. Well, that happened. We're actually having our tie Monday. It's not a defeat Monday. It's not a victory Monday. It's a tie Monday. A lot of people think that's worse than a loss, but I'm in probably the minority that it actually is much happier that we got the tie instead of the loss. And in fact, that gets us second place in the NFC North instead of falling down to possibly third or fourth if we had lost the game. So let's try to look at the positives of the fact that we did get a tie on Sunday night. I know it was very disappointing for a lot of people. It was probably a very exciting game for people who are not Packers fans or Cowboys fans. It was probably one of the most nerve-wracking games that I've watched without being at Lambeau Stadium live. But we have to move forward and accept the fact that the Packers are now 2-1-1 and second in the NFC North. And we have to look at what went wrong and what went right and see how the Packers can work over their bye week to get the ship where it needs to be back to being a contender in the NFL for the Super Bowl. Right now, it does not feel like we are. I believe we have the coaching staff. I believe we have the talent. And I think we just need the right opportunity to get better. But the good thing for the Packers is that they do have their bye week, so they have literally the next 2 weeks to focus on, number one, getting the roster healthy, number two, getting improvements in key areas that can turn what happened from last night from a tie into a clear victory as we face the rest of the NFL for the rest of the season. So let's focus on what went right. Then we're going to talk about what went wrong in the game against the Cowboys that ended in a 40-40 tie on the road. First of all, Jordan Love possibly had his most complete game despite limited targets to throw to and below average offensive play. Jordan Love was able to consistently lead the offense down the field time after time after time to tie the score, to get to the eventual tie in this game. The Packers offense moved consistently despite poor line play and inconsistent running back play. Because of the line play, we fought through significant injuries that happened before the game and after the game, and Jordan Love consistently led the offense to victory, or to points, to be more accurate, drive after drive after drive. It was actually one of the most efficient offensive games of the season for the Green Bay Packers, despite the fact that it resulted in a tie. The rushing game struggled, but it did enough to keep the passing game open for Jordan Love. If we're still looking at about 3 yards per carry, which is definitely a yard below what we traditionally like to see in Green Bay. So hopefully that's something that will improve. However, the running game did enough to keep the passing lanes open for Jordan Love to keep us in the game. Let's talk about the bad. Defense could not get off the field. They allowed so many big plays in the passing game and could consistently not stop the run. There were so many opportunities to get stops in this game, which would have led to a Packer victory, and yet over and over again, the Cowboys were making big plays in the passing game and the running game to keep in this game. Now, we do have to give our hats off to Dak Prescott and the Cowboys. They definitely played at a higher level than they played the rest of the season, probably because they were motivated over the Micah Parsons trade. But at the end of the day, the Cowboys just made more plays with less quality players to result in a tie. And the defense was not able to get consistent stops to help the offense win this game. The offensive line play was below average, and Love was throwing under pressure and off script all game. If you watch the tape, I watched it again a second time this morning, he was consistently off balance, throwing on the run, off, making amazing throws off of his back foot, jumping to the side. Jordan Love was doing everything possible to win this game. No thanks to the offensive line. Special teams once again, for the second week in a row, led to something other than a victory. For the second week in a row, we had a kick blocked, and in this game, it resulted in a 3-point swing, which really kept the Packers from winning over and over and over again, because they were always behind those 3 points that they could have had if it wasn't for special teams making significant mistakes in the kicking game. In addition, special teams allowed far too many above average returns for the Cowboys, and the special teams had no answer for the fact that the Cowboys were consistently pinning the offense back to the 20-yard line, kick after kick. Not only did we have injuries going into this game, but we got additional injuries during the game, including the loss of Wyatt in the middle, which was a big part of the inability to stop the run. So hopefully Wyatt will be back after the bye week, or the Packers need to spend the next 2 weeks with an alternate plan to replace Wyatt snaps. Or ideally, both, because one of the things that was frustrating for me is Wyatt came into the game questionable. And Watt came into the game questionable, and Watt was almost a game time decision, yet he fought through it and he played. And yet the Packers appeared to not have an option or an idea in place for how to deal with Wyatt if he was not able to get back into the game, which was the case. After Wyatt left the game, the Packers were unable to stop the run consistently, and that was a big problem. So we ended up with a tie. We need to accept it, move on, and support our Green Bay Packers in how they can get better after the bye week, because this is a critical time. There's still 70% of the season in place, and there's still plenty of avenues for the Green Bay Packers to get to the Super Bowl. We're going to talk about that in a second. But now let's turn the page and look at the bright side and move forward with the Green Bay Packers, okay? First of all, we have a bye week, so that's 2 weeks to look to get better, to look for injuries to be diminished. We also have some players that are going to come off of the PUP list, hopefully after the bye week, which means we're going to have reinforcements at wide receiver and running back to hopefully improve those two positions significantly. Hopefully, my expectation is we're going to have our starting offensive line back by the end of the bye week, which will be a significant impact for the entire offense. And I'm very convinced that with the players coming back from injury, the Green Bay Packers offense can get back to where they were week 1 and week 2 before all these injuries started to mount for week 2, for week 3 and 4. In addition, I think it's very important to keep in mind, as Packer fans, I know the last 2 weeks have been frustrating, but there are other teams out there that are in much worse positions than us that are still trying to find ways to make it to the playoffs. In particular, the 1-3 Ravens look like they're not going to make the playoffs this year. That's a huge shock for that fan base. They thought they were going to be going to the Super Bowl if they could just beat, for example, the Bills. Now they have to scramble and claw their way back into the playoff hunt. The 2-2 Commanders have been struggling, and they also are without their starting quarterback We'll see if he gets back next week. The 1-3 Texans. The Texans did get off the snide last week, and they did come off with a great game against the Titans, but they still have to fight and claw their way back into the playoffs when in the past they've been a division winner. So there's lots to be frustrated about with the Packers, but we need to be positive about the fact that at 2-1-1, the Packers are still in the hunt for a division title. And I think the path to the Super Bowl still remains intact for this team if they can come back from the loss and the tie that they just suffered. Right now, I think the key to the division, and it's always been the key to the division, is going to be beating the Lions probably on Thanksgiving at Detroit. I think the Lions will continue to stack wins, and the Packers are going to have to try to keep pace. If the Lions keep winning and the Packers get back into a winning mode and consistently win up until Thanksgiving, then I think the Packers can be in a position where they can win the division by beating Detroit on Thanksgiving. So the Packers need to not only get better between now and their next game, which is 2 weeks, but they also need to consistently build momentum into that game against the Lions at Detroit. If the Packers can do that, I still think it's very possible for them to win this division. But the time is now to get all 3 phases of the team working together efficiently and successfully. We need the offense to play well going forward. We need the defense to play well going forward. And we need special teams to stop shooting the offense and the defense in the foot. In the event that we can't win the division, okay, the next thing to do is become a very dangerous wild card team that can win on the road. And I think the addition of Micah Parsons and the improvement in the defense overall means the Green Bay Packers can travel as a wild card team and get a win and get on the way to the Super Bowl. So all those paths are still open to us despite the Packers' loss last week and tie this week. I keep thinking of it as a loss. It's not a loss. It's not a loss. It's a tie. I'm convincing myself. I might be delusional, but it's true. It is significantly and statistically important that we got a tie instead of a loss. So we have 2 weeks between games, but like the Packers, Pack Attack Cast is going to dig in and get to work. This week, I'm going to look at each position group and identify where we are now, where the Packers need to work on over the bye week, and where we could get to by the playoffs. So tomorrow, we're going to start looking at running backs and quarterbacks. And then each day for the next week, we're going to look at position groups and see how we can get better during the bye week. Because the coaches are there, the players are there, and the opportunity is still there for the Packers to make a run for the division and for the Super Bowl if we can make improvements over the next 2 weeks. So, and after the bye week, I think it's very important that the next 3 games must become wins. We need to win against the Bengals, we need to win against the Cardinals, and we need to win against the Steelers. If we can win against the Bengals, Cardinals, and Steelers, that would get us to 5-1-1 and back on track to compete for the division. We need to keep the pressure on the Lions and the rest of the division to keep winning while we flip the script and get back on track for winning games. 70% of the season remains ahead for the Green Bay Packers, so we need to stay calm, carry on, and support the Packers for the rest of the season, because I do believe that outside of losing in the playoffs later on in the season, this is probably the darkest period for the Packers. A loss that should have been a 1 and a tie that should have been a win. The Packers need to shake it off, steal a page from Taylor Swift, and carry on and get better before our next matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals. And we're going to be talking about how they can do that each and every day until kickoff against the Bengals. So go Pack Go, and we'll see you tomorrow with our thoughts on how the running game and quarterback play can improve during the bye week. We'll talk to you then.